Welcome to the GSMC Pets Podcast, the show that caters to pet lovers of all kinds. We'll talk about pets on social media, pets doing amazing things, and how to take care of the pets in your life. Whether your pet is a dog, a cat, a llama, hamster, reptile, or something more exotic, you'll find educational and entertaining information on the GSMC Pets Podcast.
I am your host, Samantha Melvin, and hopefully you all are staying safe and healthy indoors. Maybe you're watching a good movie, maybe a cringy one while we pass the time, or, maybe you're reading like me, because like I told you I think it was last episode or something like that, I've just been reading a lot. I have a stack of books that I need to get through. And today, I really want to make this light and fun, and we will get to see the return of one of my favorite things that we've talked about in this show, and that is Rebecca the Raccoon. No, it won't be an episode specifically about Rebecca, but we will be talking about something that has a special place in my heart, presidential pets. I actually feel like I was truly starting to engage when I saw the Checkers bit in an episode of Futurama. The combination of Richard Nixon impression and the goofiness of the dog were a hoot. And then, of course, when the Obamas moved into the White House, it was all over the media. What kind of dog were they going to get? Bo. Bo the beautiful boy. The Bo coverage was one of those really lighthearted things that I would love to see more on the media again. Wait. Maybe I could give you some tidbits of information about some of our presidential pets. And not just the normal, the Obamas had a big dog named Bo. We're talking about some serious zoos. Here's the lineup for our pet-loving presidents. We're going to be talking about Teddy Roosevelt and his menagerie of pets. And while we're at it, we'll talk about the other specific exotic pets of our presidents. How Congress ruined Martin Van Buren's fun. And then, Harry Truman and his apathy toward dogs, if you could call it that. And if we're talking about pets, we're absolutely going to have to talk about the demon cat of Washington, D.C. Then, you want to learn the history of a soldier bear? Now, before we get into the soldier bear, oh man, I could think of a song about that, but anyway, before we talk about him, let's talk about my boy, Teddy Roosevelt. I've always admired this man as just a man. His hyper-masculinity is a major trait that people remember about him. He was part of the Rough Riders. He actually finished a speech at a rally after being shot in the chest by someone in the audience. And then also, another thing is riding a moose across a river. So, a lot of bizarre things there. And for the moose, I do want to say that you don't have to worry. There is actually photograph evidence for that. Actually, there are multiple instances where he has ridden a moose. So, keep that in mind. Maybe it'll give you just a little smile during these times, and maybe it's a laugh. It is kind of unbelievable. And yes, he is also remembered for his menagerie of pets. And I mean, it was a huge collection. Out of all the presidents that we have had, Roosevelt was the most memorable for me because of his love of animals. What makes this man and his pets so special? Well, I would just have to say, the sheer amount of animals that he had that were not your typical Fido and Mittens. And then, you have Calvin Coolidge, who is the only other president that closely trailed him in sheer number of pets, including the raccoon Rebecca. But we're going to top this, and you're going to be amazed. So, here is what Teddy Roosevelt had. He had 8 horses, 2 carriage horses, as if they're different. But he also had a Shetland pony for his son, a bull terrier, a St. Bernard, a Chesapeake Bay Retriever, a mixed breed dog, a Manchester Terrier, a Pekingese, a snake named Emily Spinach, a hyacinth macaw, 2 cats, a badger, a rabbit, 2 kangaroo rats. And, just a side note, while I think it's cool that he had those kangaroo rats, I think it would be much cooler if he had, kangaroos. But, again, back to the list, he also had a flying squirrel and 5 guinea pigs. That's actually sounding pretty standard, right? Some exotic ones that aren't out of this world, but I'm not done with the list yet. Yeah, I'm not done. And there is definitely more. And let me catch my breath in this. I'm going to give you the rest of the list. So, he also had a lion, a hyena, a wildcat, a coyote, 5 bears. 5 bears! And let's see, 2 parrots, a zebra, a barn owl, a lizard, an unspecified amount of roosters, a hen, a pig, and of course, a raccoon. And let's see here. Yeah, I think that's about it. Who knows, though? This man, he may have had secret pets that he hid from his wife and kids. I wouldn't be surprised. Can you imagine good old Teddy, sitting in his back porch, and he's just maybe tossing out some food for the nearby deer to come over and befriend him? I think that's totally possible, actually. I'm actually curious about why someone like Roosevelt became such an animal lover. Well, history time. Or, if this is something that you would prefer, we can just call it story time. Now, Roosevelt was actually very ill as a child. He was sick often, and his asthma didn't help at all. And he was basically immunocompromised. And I imagine that if a parent has a child that gets sick often and suffers from asthma, they are going to want to put a bubble around them and keep them indoors as much as they can. I imagine that was his parents' thinking when they homeschooled him. He would at least be protected at home. Now, I'm going to run with this theory because he was outdoors so much. This must have been something that really inspired his interest in nature and everything in it. It definitely encouraged his love for exercise later in life. Back to animals and Roosevelt, though. Did you know that he was a biology major in Harvard University? I didn't. This guy has demonstrated how interested he is in nature and life itself. But here's the thing, though. I have to really get back at this, and it's, how could this man have 5 bears? I can understand, probably 1 bear. And, well, I don't even know if I can even understand that, but still. There have been some nice stories of pet bears. Well, Winnie the Pooh doesn't count because he's like a stuffed animal. But, I still have a good feeling about Pooh Bear. But, let's see. There was also even a pet bear, Wojtek, that served in World War II. And we'll talk more about Wojtek in our last segment. But I do want to give you some tidbits about him. He was always up to his bear antics, and he would eat, sleep, steal food, wrestle with the soldiers to keep up their strength, and, of course, to have fun, because he liked taking part in plenty of pranks. Oh, right, and smoking cigarettes. Wojtek loved cigarettes, but I do not recommend giving bears or any other animal cigarettes, or beer, any kind of alcohol. And then, back to the list, a hyena? A hyena? I've watched enough animal shows to know that hyenas are quite dangerous. This man had 6 kids. How in the world did he manage? I've learned of hyenas charging into someone and causing serious injury, and their bite strength and how they bite? full body chills, man. Or in a less interesting way to phrase it, it's, in other words, frightening. Another thing. I'm not surprised about him having big cats and his horses and ponies. That seems, pretty Roosevelt, honestly. However, I can't get over this zebra. This seems so bizarre. I imagine that he got it the same way he got the lion delivery. That they definitely should have given the delivery boy a really, really good tip. The thing is that I've seen zebras in bizarre scenarios, like nothing kind of weird, but one specifically that I mostly think of when it comes to strange animals being in places that you don't expect them. Like, there's this one specific giraffe in mind that I have, and it's just stuck with me for a very long time. I think it was like in 2011 when I saw this giraffe. But apparently, a small town in the Midwest has a veterinarian who specializes in exotic animals, which is pretty cool. The first time we ever noticed this place, I couldn't believe my eyes. I could have sworn that I saw this giraffe grazing in the fenced area. My husband thought I was crazy. The second time, though, confirmed it. I was able to point it out to him. And then this time, there were actually 2 giraffes, so it was, something you couldn't really deny unless, like, my glasses were completely, not helpful anymore. But there always seemed to be interesting animals rotating at least bi-weekly. Then the zebras appeared, and I was just awestruck at their magnificence as they trotted about, playing with each other. Though what took the cake one day was seeing these baby Shetland ponies chasing after each other. So cute. And again, I just want to say it's absolutely, positively adorable. This goes back to the episode, Do I Want a Raccoon? By the way, check it out if you haven't yet. Just visit our website. So the question is, how exotic does an exotic animal have to be not be a good idea to take in as a pet? I want to emphasize his hyena. Those guys are dangerous and belong in the wild. And I'm plugging another episode for you guys. I had mentioned in the self-isolation episode where I praised Jenna Marbles for knowing and recognizing when is the time to get multiple pets. Financially. How can someone afford the number of pets that Roosevelt had? Presidential income? What about before that? Because I'm pretty sure that he had a lot of these pets before he became president. But who knows? I think that may require even more research, and I'd rather learn more about the quirky animals that our presidents have had. And, what now? Well, how about I give you a rundown of some of the other exotic pets that grace the White House? Because quantity sometimes is not as good as quality, right? That's what many teachers tell their students when it comes to writing essays, actually. And anyway, I guarantee that some of these exotic animals that I tell you about will make you just stop and say, what?
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
and we are back. And all I gotta say is Teddy, Teddy, Teddy. I can't imagine the amount of pets, well, exotic pets that you had. I mean, especially the ones that you probably didn't really keep record of. Just saying. But just thinking about the last segment was really, really overwhelming, and I'd rather not inundate you guys with long lists of exotic pets of our presidents. So with that in mind, can't I just highlight a few? You know, yeah, let's do that. So let's start with President John Tyler. His pet that I want to highlight is not exactly exotic, per se. It's a horse. Yes, a horse. A horse named the General. And yes, the is definitely a part of his name. Tyler loved this horse. You can tell just by what he does later on. I'll get to that. But it was his favorite horse out of all the other horses that he owned. The cool thing is that he actually owned the General for basically his entire life. And I'm pretty sure it was about 21 years. And then, when the General did pass, President Tyler had a grave dug up for him, and he placed a headstone that had an epitaph that said, well, and this is going to be really sweet, guys. Here lies the body of my good horse, the General. For 20 years, he bore me around the circuit of my practice, and in all that time, he never made a blunder. Would that his master could say the same. John Tyler. It's a very, very sweet sentiment, don't you think? And, you know, the great thing is that you can actually go to this little gravesite, and it'll be on Tyler's plantation, Sherwood. And I honestly feel inspired by how long this pet owner relationship lasted. 21 years, I think? Yeah, I said that already. 21 years. And, you know, that's how long some marriages last. And you guys are going to hate me for saying this, but that's honestly being generous. Either way, the General is kind of an American sweetheart, and we should all love him. Even if he wasn't used as a war horse during the Civil War. That's what some people claim, actually. The timeline is all off, though. Seriously, Tyler had died a year into the Civil War. He was 72 when he died. Back then, 72 is, well, it was extremely ancient. Just think of it like this. Can you imagine your 72-year-old grandfather riding a horse into battle? And then imagine that horse being a war horse, and those things can get pretty big. But mine, I don't think so. We were pretty scrawny people. But no, I definitely don't think so, and I would love to see or hear what you guys have to say about that. Would your grandfather be doing that kind of stuff at his age? So, now, let's get on to the strange pets. Aside from Roosevelt's pets, this is one of the craziest pets to grace the halls of the White House with its presence. Now, let's talk about John Quincy Adams. Now, yes, he's related to John Adams, but it's kind of like a distant relationship, if I understood correctly. But he had been given an alligator as a gift from the Marquis de Lafayette in France. And the funny thing is that the Marquis actually regifted it to Adams. The alligator that he had received was actually for him being a war hero in the Revolutionary War. And Adams was probably unsure of what to do. And he just kind of took the gator and he shoved him into the unfinished east room and the bathroom nearby. You could say that there were many people who had a serious fright when they saw the gator just kind of roaming about. And actually, Adams found a lot of enjoyment in showing off the showing off the gator. And he enjoyed seeing, like, the awe and the fear that people would be expressing. And he did that until the gator had to be re-gifted, yet again, to who? I haven't found any sources, but I can imagine that the new owners also had no idea what to do with it. At this point in history, they could really just flush it down the toilet and then put it into the sewers, and, maybe it could be just the beginning of the long lineage of sewer gators. That's a thought, right? Maybe I'm onto something. Come on, guys. Just let me play with this idea, and maybe you guys might see some significance in it. But other pets that lived in the White House were far smaller than that gator. President Benjamin Harrison had 2 possums. They were named Mr. Reciprocity and Mr. Protection. Yeah, those were their names. A quick explanation for them is that it's a callback to the platform of the Republican Party of the time. It reads, "Protection and reciprocity are twin measures of the Republican policy and go hand in hand." Okay. The possums were a gift to his grandkids, but do you really think those kiddos actually named them? I mean, I don't even know how old these kids are, for one thing, but I don't know if reciprocity would be in their vocabulary at that time. So, yeah, it's quite clear that Harrison named those gators, oh my gosh, I'm still thinking about that gator thing. Sewer gators, gotta look into it. But Harrison was quite devoted to the Republican Party, and also was just clearly the namer of these possums. And you could also pretty much tell that he was pretty dorky as well. I mean, Mr. Reciprocity? Really? Now let's talk about possums. They are actually quite cute. It might be because on Twitter I follow someone who posts pictures of possums, every single day, every morning, and also every night. And also their Twitter profile pic is a possum. So there's that. And then there are also blog posts and articles about them now, describing ways to care for them, where their babies are held, which is in a little pouch because they're marsupials, and also what are their temperaments like. The internet has some kind of obsession with them, and I have at some point bought into this trend too. But hey, you just might be the next pet parent of a very trendy animal. Just guard your trash. You know what these kitties can do. Like mice, right? I actually really wasn't sure if I wanted to include this in the section, but why not? But bear with me, there is a setup to the punchline, meaning that there's going to be some history that I need to get into. So, just kind of like a general test. Who was President Abraham Lincoln's vice president? I'll give you a second to think about that. Okay, I gave you more than a second. So, the answer is Andrew Johnson. And he became president after Lincoln was assassinated. And honestly, poor guy, this was the worst time to take over. Seriously, the Civil War was still going on. It was coming to a close, but Johnson was a tailor before he started his political career. And he was like a senator and a government official in his home state. But this man had no experience regarding war except for when he took part in the meetings in the Oval Office. But, okay, let's talk about his pets. This poor guy was actually the first president to ever be impeached. Why? Well, just a little more history, sorry. I told you I would be talking about their pets now, but I changed my mind. Gotta give more. There was something called the Tenure of Office Act, and in a nutshell, Johnson couldn't fire any cabinet officials. Sorry. He refused, saying it was unconstitutional, and then the House voted to impeach him. Anyway, okay, now to the pets. You've been waiting so patiently. So he didn't actually seem to have any pets. Whoops. But during the entire time that he was pushing through the stress of the impeachment process, he actually found a family of mice that would play in his room, and he started leaving flour on the floor at night for them to continue playing around and, constantly visit him. So, that sounds kind of sad. But, I guess that would be kind of counting as a pet, right? Maybe? But it really kind of goes along with this next segment after the break. And it's pets that honestly, in the end, don't count as pets. More particularly, the pets that would never be for the pretty much forgotten President Martin Van Buren. The pets, what were they? 2 adorable tiger cubs that also happened to be gifted.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Alright, so we're gonna try this again, and I want you to slow the fuck down, Sam. Come on. Get your shit together. Pulling up the script. Alright. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, and I just gotta jump into this because, well, it kind of needs to be said. Gives us a little more history on one of our presidents that we don't really talk about very often, but he did show up in a commercial. I don't know what commercial it was for, but he did show up, and I just want to say that what is unfortunate, but also kind of a bit of a relief, is that the kinds of pets that enter the White House these days are not as intensely exotic. The presidents of the past had a lot of freedom. There were fewer or probably non-existent animal rights groups that could be relentless in their contacts with the presidents and anyone else in the White House. Now, the pets of the presidents have become more traditional these days, depending on where they come from. For instance, Bush, George W. Bush, because there are 2, right? George W. Bush had a cow, but the cow was still in the ranch in Texas, so I don't know if that entirely counts, since it didn't show its face in the White House grounds. But you see more dogs, that is for sure. There is an occasional cat. For instance, President Clinton had Socks, the cat, for the time being when he was in the office. But the main point here is that the presence of activist groups in the present day has changed what enters the White House. This isn't wrong, definitely not. I think I've already voiced plenty of times in previous episodes that I find issue with how wild animals have become pets, and how that change in environment is damaging for the pets, and also, well, for you too. Now, I doubt that any of that went through the minds of anyone in this battle of not fists, but of wits. And we'll start talking about that battle very soon. Now, we've seen exotic pets given as gifts to people. You know John Quincy Adams and his, alligator. And honestly, that still probably tops it, for any topic right now, because I'm always going to be obsessing over sewer gators. And always wondering, was he the start of the sewer gator thing? But anyway, let's get on with it. Let's talk about Martin Van Buren and his 2 tiger cubs. Just like Adams, Van Buren was given animals as gifts. The cubs were boxed up and sent by water so that it could reach the president, and when he received them, he was absolutely thrilled. I mean, come on guys, just go ahead, take a second, maybe even pause this podcast for a second, and Google right now a picture of tiger cubs. Sure, you've probably seen them, but come on guys, we gotta distress a little bit. But they had won him over so much that he began preparing the White House for them to live in, possibly some renovations, I bet. Anyway, Van Buren loved them so much, he wanted to keep them. Here's the thing. Congress was not pleased. For whatever reason would they not be pleased? Well, maybe the possibility of them growing up and probably mauling someone? That sounds about right for tigers. There's always going to be that chance. But, still struck by the beauty and cuteness of these creatures, Van Buren still pushed. He argued and argued, to no avail though, because eventually the cubs ended up being taken to the local zoo so that they could live in a more suitable environment. I want to say this. Congress was the one confiscating the cubs. I can't imagine how terrifying that would be for the cubs that, in general. I mean, I've always felt that the constant moving and settling of, any family with pets makes it a bit more difficult for animals that are possibly traumatized by, the frequent new environments. Hopefully the cubs eventually found a safe space for them. But we can all agree that Congress ruined Van Buren's vibes. To be honest, this was one of Congress's successful decisions. No offense to Van Buren, but I don't think he would have had the ability to care for them in a way that was effective and in a way that wouldn't end up him being killed. This is always something that I'm afraid of, actually. And I'm pretty sure I've mentioned this a lot before, but being unable to train a wild animal and suffering because of it, again, fatal attraction. From, and that's from the, the early years in the last decade, and this was also when we still had Animal Planet. Anyway, why would you risk it? Was Van Buren so touched by the idea of having big cats hanging around the Oval Office? Kind of Disney's original Aladdin to me, with the animals wandering around, staying close to the people. Kind of like that. But then, my imagination goes wild, and I imagine them just kind of pacing about, and there's more intensity in the room. But, we're going to go down the rabbit hole again. But here is one of my wonderful, wonderful stories. So, a few years ago, I was at the zoo, and I was just hanging around the lion enclosure when a bride and groom, dressed up in the gown and tux, they cut through the crowd and they started fawning over how cute the lionesses was. They decided to take a picture of the bride standing next to the lioness as it seemed like a, pretty cool idea, I guess. But the bride starts talking to the photographer, and I see her turn her back to the lioness. And I instantly think of what Owen in Jurassic World said about the velociraptors. Don't turn your back on them. But, just kind of a thought there. But as she turns her back to the lioness stands on her back legs, and she starts clawing at the glass, to get to this lady. Like, she wasn't paying attention. Her back was turned to her. Why not try to pounce? She won't even see it happen. I mean, the most frustrating thing about this was people surrounding the bride and the lioness busting out into, like, OMG, she wants to play so cute! Hate to break it to you, but the lioness isn't playing, or it's a different kind of play that you're thinking. It's clearly trying to spring an attack of some sort, whether it's playful or not. The chance of you being injured if a lion were to magically appear outside of the enclosure, pretty high. And yes, I did just do a Harry Potter reference. And a part of me wonders if, had Van Buren been allowed to have those cubs, would it play out like it did in the zoo, where eventually they would have started, like, trying to do play attacks and eventually hurt him? Or would he pull what Adams did and put the tigers in the bathroom so that they wouldn't get to him and he would be able to freak people out? But either way, people have become pretty desensitized to what some animals can do. People love hyenas, for instance, probably because of Lion King and all the hyenas in it. And I'm sure I've said this, but hyenas are powerful creatures that can really hurt you. Look, do I have to go back and repeat everything that I said about hyenas earlier? Okay, good. So, look, I'm not saying that it's Disney's fault, but, just saying. Now, the thing is that Van Buren didn't have Disney back then, but you could say that he was still dazzled by the exotic creatures, and, many people would be like this, past, present, future. Again, they would start idealizing and claiming that they could be able to handle it, unlike the other people that couldn't handle it. It's something that humans do. It's all about that hubris, right? Like saying, oh, it's just like any other cat. It's just bigger, with bigger teeth, and a bigger stomach, and a stronger jaw strength, and sharper claws. But who knows? Who knows how it would have worked out between him and the tigers? It is an interesting bit of history that we really don't talk about, and, I did want to give a spotlight to Van Buren. It's just that curiosity of what if. Anyway, there are the what ifs, and then there is reality, and this is something we're going to talk about when I tell you the story of how President Harry Truman gave away a dog that one of his supporters gifted him. I'm noticing a general pattern here. There are a lot of animals being regifted here among the presidents in this podcast episode. Have you noticed that? Remind me to never try to gift an animal to them and find someone else that, that I trust to give an animal to. Just about anyone else, I bet, because I don't even know who the person truly is when, it's a president, unless I knew them personally. But anyway, we're going to take a brief break, and then we're going to get back to talking about Harry Truman.
Is weird, odd, strange, or just plain bizarre is really your cup of tea? Then, the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast will give you that fix. Can't believe it? Well, listen for yourself as we deliver the strangest news you definitely won't find on CNN or Fox. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast.
And we are back. Basically, I just want to start by saying the history of presidential pets is riddled with gifting and regifting pets. The White House, honestly, beforehand, will forever be known as a zoo, especially after the animals that Teddy Roosevelt and Calvin Coolidge brought into it, at least to me. However, we have to consider the other people, the people that aren't dog people or even cat people. Like, President Harry Truman. He was one of them. Before we say anything else about Truman, though, let me give you a scenario. Picture this. You are a fan of someone and you decide that you want to give them something. Now, this person is someone that you don't know. You only know their public image. What is an appropriate gift to give them, then? And no, not a cursed necklace or poison wine. This is not Harry Potter. But, the necklace and the wine do seem to be in line with my general understanding of gift giving. People that you generally are acquainted to. For birthdays, weddings, and holidays, and other, big celebrations, you kind of, cater to what you think the person wants. That, for people that you barely know, maybe like a Secret Santa party or a gift exchange, you might give someone a refrigerator magnet or candy or a candle, maybe. But my question for you, would you ever think to give a perfect stranger a living thing? We'll just go ahead and say, would you give a stranger a pet? I wouldn't. It's going way over the line of appropriateness. And something to consider and think about this is, through the filter that this gift that you're giving is given as a surprise. Alright, so here's where I vent. So, you are making many assumptions about this stranger. You are assuming that no one in their family is allergic. So, there is potential of someone getting sick, someone having a really bad allergic reaction, and then possibly this pet being rehomed. Then, number 2 out of this, out of 5 assumptions that you're making, you are assuming that they have enough space for it, because not everyone lives in a 2-story home with 2,000 square feet of space. There are some people that live in 650 square foot studio apartments. We're all not the same, and maybe the person in the studio apartment already has 2 pets with them. Don't give them another. They don't have space. They're not going to be happy. 3. You are assuming that they have time for it because everyone only works one job or they don't have any other obligations. So if you don't have time for a pet, then you probably shouldn't have one because they get lonely, they have feelings, and they have needs. So moving on to number 4. You are assuming that they can or want to have another cost. I'm referring back to a few episodes. Pets are expensive. A long-term commitment. Please remember that. And don't put a financial burden on someone that, you don't even know. Now, 5. Well, this is a good question, too. What if they don't like dogs? Because I can guarantee that some people are more cat people. And then there are others that aren't really pet people at all. So I want to talk more on number 5, mostly about this assumption made about Harry Truman. Here's the story. There was a fan of Truman during his time as president, and one day a crate arrived at the White House. Inside of it, a 5-week-old puppy named Feller, the Cocker Spaniel. And this just blows my mind. Why did this person send a puppy to Truman? Why? Well, I'll be understanding here. I'm just going to say that having a pet when you are elected as president, well, that seems like a tradition. I can think there are so many presidents that I can think of that have had some sort of pet. And, this this woman probably, saw that Truman didn't have a dog at the time in the White House, so she took the time to find a dog and then send it to the White House. Now, I would say that it is quite understandable and well-meaning. I mean, Truman did have a dog. This dog was named Mike. And he was like way before Feller ever showed up. But Mike was living elsewhere now. He was a dog that had already been regifted. So, there's that. There's history here. You could say that about people giving pets as gifts during the holiday season. They think it's a good idea, and then it doesn't really end very well. So, for instance, maybe little Johnny wants a dog for Christmas, and then the season ends, the novelty ends, the drive to be responsible ends, and then the parents don't want to pick up the slack, even though they were the ones that used their own hard-earned money to get this creature. Again, they made an investment in another individual's life. So think of it like that. Now, what happens after that happens? Well, let's see. The pet is dropped off at the Humane Society or animal shelter, or they're re-gifted to someone else. And this is exactly what happened to Feller. Who did he re-gift this puppy to? Well, to his personal physician. But apparently, Feller found his forever home elsewhere, in a farm in Ohio. And there, he finally lived a full, happy life without the fear of being regifted again. So, now, this makes me wonder, this should make everyone wonder, what happened to Truman? Because he's pretty, people will follow the news about this. Especially with how, really invested people get with, presidential pets. So, well, dog lovers all over the U.S. were angered by this. And this wasn't just a few people. It was thousands of angry Americans writing letters to Truman. I'm guessing we can call it kind of just hate mail. And his indifference toward Feller continued. When he was even asked about Feller in an interview, Truman said, "The what? The what? I'm not even sure what to think of that statement. Did he just block Feller out of his memories? Until he was reminded of him? It kind of seems that way. And that sounds ridiculous. Honestly, we could probably assume that he was just so indifferent to him that Feller wasn't even worth remembering to Truman." Yeah, let's pause on that. That's cold, man. Now, anyway, back to this. The Truman's Library states that, quote, "they prefer to be a pet-free family," unquote. And that sounds about right, but there's definitely more to the story. The truth with Truman was that, well, according to this author and dog expert Stanley Coren, it was quite clear that Truman, quote-unquote, from Coren himself, Truman flat out did not like dogs. Apparently, he called Mike, the first dog, quote-unquote, a darn nuisance, and he called Feller, quote-unquote, a dumb dog that he just needed to get rid of. He allegedly said that I didn't ask for him and I don't need him. Yikes. And that, my friends, is why you don't give strangers living things as pets. So, keep that in mind. You definitely don't assume that they would like a pet. I'll say that again. It has well-meaning. It was well-meaning. And she didn't have the benefit of the internet, and, because of that, there was no way of her to really find out about this information, unless she was a close friend or a family member, and she was neither. So, if I haven't made my point clear enough, don't gift people you don't know living things. I might even go further and say that you don't give anyone a living thing at all, unless you've had a serious conversation about it, because it is an individual's life on the line here. And just so you all know, after Truman, every other U.S. president had a dog in the White House. Which, I don't even know, how to even process this. And this brings up the questions about statistics and why our presidents have typically have had dogs. I don't really know. I guess, for me, when I see a dog, I see confidence. And that's an ideal trait of a leader, among other things. Then, of course, they are man's best friend. However, if you know anything about this, I'd love to hear what you all have to say. Because I can keep speculating all day long, but I won't keep doing that to you. After all, we have so much more to talk about when it relates to presidential pets, and this next segment may also send shivers up your spine. Why? Because of ghosts. That's why. And what if we combine ghosts? Nah. Let's talk demons combined with cats. Ha ha ha, I can hear some of you saying, well, aren't cats demons already? Hardy har, hardy har. So let's ask this question before the next segment. Would you be afraid if a demon cat spent their time terrorizing you at your place of employment? Think on that during the break.
The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Back. I hope you had time to scoop your cat's litter box, or maybe time to let your dog out, or maybe even enough time to feed your pets. I don't know, it's kind of a short break. We'll see what, how you guys did. Now, if you were to ask some of our presidents in the past, they probably didn't because of the sheer amount of pets they had. Or, maybe they didn't have to worry about that because they didn't have any animals in their life. Well, as Truman said, a pet-free family. I almost actually wonder if his aversion to animals may be because of a run-in with a demon in the Capitol building. And this demon? Demon Cat of DC. Ooh. And that, my friends, is our next topic. I think I first heard about this demon cat from an episode of Ghost Adventures. And now I have a fascination of Demon Cat and the stories around it. But historians like to ruin the fun sometimes, because of their logic and facts and all. And that makes people not want to really believe. But go ahead, you can laugh. But there is apparently physical evidence. Not compelling physical evidence, but there is physical evidence. Mostly paw prints. Though there was a period of time when the Capitol building had to get its floors redone, and it's possible that the cat prints, or the paw prints, could have been a result of a cat walking on the wet cement before it was done. But, as Fox Mulder has said many times, I want to believe. Still, we gotta talk about this demon cat. People suspect that DC, the abbreviated name of Demon Cat, was part of a group of cats originally released to take care of a rodent problem. With the other cats disappearing, getting adopted, or dying off, it eventually narrowed down to DC. And now people have been seeing a black cat around the Capitol for over a century. And they assume that this cat could very well be DC. What makes DC a demon, though? I guess he gets bigger and more menacing when he approaches people at night? Nah, that's only one part of it. Seeing DC doing this means essentially that there is going to be some sort of national tragedy of some sort. Some things that this appearance has foretold was John Quincy Adams' death, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, the October 1929 stock market crash, and the assassination of John F. Kennedy. So, could we say that DC is like the Grimm? A cat version of it? Or, actually, this is a good question. Or is the Grimm the dog version of DC? You know, I actually looked this up because I was really curious about it. Apparently the dog Grimm has been around longer than DC. And that's about, in the 17th century? More than a century before DC. As of right now, I haven't heard of any reports of DC and DC. Maybe that'll change in the next few months. Maybe someone might recall seeing DC in the Capitol. And maybe they'll say, well, around the beginning of the year, I could have sworn I saw this cat. Well, in my honest opinion, no, someone will not do this, but I really just feel like using DC is almost a slap in the face for everyone that has been suffering as of late. But I digress. Or maybe we could say it's just stray black cats over a long period of time. To be honest, I wouldn't be surprised that news of Washington, D.C. and national tragedies would trigger someone to look for a sign of D.C. And if they were familiar with the White House lore, D.C. might have been the first sign of tragedy they could think of. Hey, it's up to you to believe me or not. I have nothing to lose. I also don't really have an opinion. Okay, fine. I think it's honestly that people have associations with tragedy and DC, if they know about the legend. If anything, they're just misremembering or creating a false memory. That happens. Or maybe they're mistaking any cat as just one. All I have to say is, so all cats look the same? My crocodile looks like my alligator, so they must be the same, right? So frustrating is the association badge of cat is red, but this is a mirror problem that he has. Please, people, give him a break. You're overthinking things and searching for things that ruin our black cat that I not face acidic on them or something have prevented. Knock on wood, right? Knock on wood. Eisen is the sweetest and luckiest cat in the world. He is a survivor. Honestly, all pets are the luckiest in the world. That is my opinion, but I know you guys believe me. So I guess, then, that DC is being stereotyped by an old wives' tale. I mean, how do we know that DC was a black cat? Is it just news given orally over the hundreds of years since then? And people, without a thought, just agreed with it and spread the story of DC and how awful he was? There is also another possibility. Let's go ahead and say that DC wasn't real. Maybe he was a figment of someone's imagination when searching for answers about a national tragedy. Then maybe it becomes something like a tradition for government officials and to further add character to the Capitol. I mean, just the whisper of a ghost is enough for people to come swarming, right? Seriously, look no further than paranormal experts. Then they're copycats. Eventually, we have more and more people scheduling tours in the Capitol. Tourism. Tourism is what's going on here, and I have to ask, is DC a tool of tourism? Then, if he is, I want my Demon Cat souvenir. And I want it when I wear DC plush mad buttons. Go ahead and put my order in for that shirt if you think that there's not enough. There needs to be more in demand. I mean, guys, I'll go ahead and say I'm a women's size medium, so please send it to me, or you can contact me, message me or something, and then we can set up all the details. So we have a demon cat in the halls of the Capitol. But do you know what else we had? Do you know who helped our men during World War II? Wojtek. You're thinking he's just a bear. Sure, he was just in the military. This bear doesn't seem that special. No other bear will hold a candle to Smokey the Bear or the Care Bears or Winnie the Pooh. And that's where you're wrong. He was more than just a bear. He was a hero in the Polish army, an icon. Keep listening, and I'll fill you in with a fantastic story of her and his army buddies and the adventures that they had. But before I let you go and we wait on this break before I can talk to you about the wonderful Wojtek, I just wanted to let you guys know that probably the last time that we saw any sign of Demon Cat was in the 1940s, towards the end, maybe even after the end of World War II. And, I mean, that seems to be the last one, I think. But people in, popular culture have referenced it. Most notably, there is a roller derby team that is called the DC Demon Cats, and I just love it. I really do just love it. And I really feel like if Washington, D.C. wants to capitalize on this, I'd be so totally into, joining in on the Demon Cat game. But again, we're going to be talking about something also wonderful and also very, very inspiring, to be honest. So again, I'll see you after the break, and we'll talk about Wojtek. Alright.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now. Don't bother. What's hot on Netflix and everything in between. That's GSMCpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Hey, we're back. And I just wanted to do a quick reminder that, last segment I was talking about Demon Cats, and I also had a very nice, very polite ask of anyone that could do this for me. And that was get a souvenir t-shirt of Demon Cats from the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. If that is possible, that'd be amazing. And again, my size, medium, in women's. And I will leave it at that. And we will talk about another animal that actually really, really deserves to have a t-shirt of his own. And that is the bear, Wojtek. And there is that big story about this guy. And he is a big guy too, so it kind of fits. He was actually 500 to 600 pounds by the, at his largest, I believe. But it started way, way before that. The story starts way before that. And we'll start from there, actually. A long, long time ago. No. There was a time during World War II where these Polish POWs found this bear cub. And they brought them back to the camp and hid them in their tents. And then eventually they were freed by Russia and, well, because of them becoming part of the Allied forces. And essentially, Wojtek keeps on growing after being fed his condensed milk, and the condensed milk was actually held in like an old bottle of vodka. But he kept on growing and growing, and he seemed, to really start finding his place in this regiment, actually. And he became a part of a family that would prank each other and just basically keep people happy, I guess. Like, one of the major quirky things about Wojciech, and I believe I already mentioned this before in another segment, Wojciech loved his cigarettes, and he would smoke his cigarettes and then swallow them. And honestly, it wasn't even him smoking, it was him just taking a puff and then swallowing it. And in addition to that, he liked to drink his beer too. And whenever his beer bottle was empty, he would end up basically staring deeply into the bottle, looking so forlorn. And I can imagine, Winnie the Pooh, staring into his honey jar and there's no honey and he's so forlorn. But Wojciech and Winnie the Pooh are very, very different. Wojciech was also a part of the welcoming crew for the new recruits. And when I say that, I mean it was an opportunity for a prank. So essentially, the recruits would arrive, and Wojciech would eventually find a way to get one of them upside down with the guy's feet in his mouth. And this poor guy, hanging by his legs, would be crying and screaming and just freaking out over the idea of this giant bear picking him up and then eating him. So, that regiment really, 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 really had a good sense of humor, didn't they? And Wojciech was also a very smart bear. He learned how to turn on the showers in any place that the regiment was staying at. And usually it was fine. It was pretty funny to them. But then there were times when they actually ended up with water shortages. So he was just a poor sweet bear. Just let him be. I would say that probably the peak of Wojciech's career as a soldier bear would be during one battle where he was actually carrying crates of live ammo and shells to the soldiers so that they could continue fighting. But the reality was he was actually carrying empty ammo crates and empty shells to them. And it's actually pretty hilarious. And I just have to say, this boy was trying. He really was. And I think that's all that matters, especially since, the soldiers didn't really mind. And they honestly found it as a great morale booster during this battle. And they were successful, and Wojciech eventually received a rank and a number, so that he was, kind of quote unquote unofficially a part of the army for them. And that's just one of those crazy things that kind of happens, right? You don't think of all these weird stories and then say, how can we make this even weirder? Maybe you do. Well, I guess I do that. But anyway, Wojciech actually managed to survive throughout the entire war, and he, after another battle, more of wits over fists kind of deal, Wojciech was sent to basically his retirement. People were fighting over where he needed to go, but he did end up in a small town in Scotland, and he just lived on a farm. And for the rest of his days, he was eating, jam and honey. He was kicking a soccer ball with kids and adults that would come by to say hi to him. What else would he do? He would go to dances and celebrations and children's parties. It was a real thing for him. He really enjoyed the end of his days. And I know that you guys are probably wondering at this point, it's well, Sam, aren't you against, humans taking in wild animals and then training them? Why are you making this exception? And I know it's a really complicated thing because, well, I do believe that. And these men weren't trained to effectively, like, raise a bear to not maul them, but somehow they did. And I feel like Wojciech, I'll just say, in hindsight, he turned out to be a really good bear. And he knew his tricks, and by the end of it, he was the new insignia for this regiment. He was essentially a sign of hope and strength. And, I mean, what does that matter? He's just a bear. Well, it's kind of like this thing with Balto, too. I hope you guys know who Balto is. He was well, if you're thinking of the historical fiction of Balto, if you could call it that animated movie with him being like half wolf or something like that. Well, he wasn't half wolf. He was actually a full-blooded Siberian husky. But he was a young husky and very inexperienced. But he ran the last leg of this big journey to get a serum to help people who are very sick in Nome, Alaska. So basically, they were taking a trip. I wouldn't even say trip. It was a journey, a real journey, from Nome, Alaska to then Anchorage, Alaska, and then back to Nome, Alaska. So it was arduous, and imagine this is a 3-year-old dog, and he hasn't had that much experience going through a journey like this, but he managed to do it, and he became basically a symbol of hope for these people. And, well, I don't know if you guys know, but Balto also has a statue, which also reminds me, it was in Edinburgh. Wojciech, he actually got his own statue too, and hey, it's probably going to be a future trip for me. A very distant future, but still, nonetheless, it'll be a future trip, because I gotta see that. Now, I will have to say that if there is no Wojciech t-shirt, then there better be a Balto t-shirt. And not the one for the animated movie. No, I want the legit Balto. But anyway, it was definitely, an experience learning about Wojciech and just kind of seeing an interesting part of our history that, we don't really get to hear very much. I'd love to hear more stories of heroic animals, right? And not the heroic animals that you see in, animated movies. I want the real world. I definitely want to hear the real world. And I want to emphasize, not fictionalized, because I do know about Lassie and Benji. I just want to know more about other animals, the ones that deserve to be written in the books of history, right? Anyway, I think it is about time for me to go. I have been definitely pushing through this self-isolation. We're actually going to be put on lockdown, probably tomorrow, actually. So, you'll probably find some very interesting social media posts from me for the podcast, and, well, hopefully I really want you guys to continue listening to this. That would be fantastic, but I'll go ahead and say my goodbyes, and thank you for listening to the GSMC Pets Podcast, which was brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would love to ask that you guys please remember to subscribe to the show and that you write me a nice review. And I'll go ahead and say that really helps us. It helps us get better and helps us entertain you even more. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, that'd be fantastic. And I'm just going to go ahead and thank you and have a wonderful night.
You've been listening to the GSMC Pets Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all of the shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, from business news to weird news. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's podcast.